Things are not as they appear to be. And in Washington, that's not unusual. In fact, that may be the norm, that in Washington, things are often not what they appear to be. If you follow the news, you've been seeing reports of Elon Musk and Doge and getting rid of waste and fraud and abuse by the billions, if not trillions of dollars. And yet we are meeting here today, though, because Congress, namely the Senate, wants to increase federal spending. So on the one hand, you have Elon Musk and Doge and the Democrats complaining to high heaven, he's cutting too much, they're cutting too much. And Senate Republicans are coming forward today to pass a budget to allow them to raise federal spending. What gives? Are Republicans for getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse and reducing the deficit, balancing the budget, as the president says? Or are they really for increasing spending $340 billion? The budget that we will vote on will allow increased spending in the military by $150 billion, increased spending for the border $175 billion, $20 billion for the Coast Guard. It adds up to about $340 billion. Well, if we were fiscally prudent, if we were fiscally conservative, why wouldn't we take the savings from Elon Musk and Doge and move it over here and help with the border? Why would we be doing a brand new bill to increase spending by $340 billion? That's because the Senate is acting as it always has. The Senate hasn't gotten the message. President Trump came to town, a new way of thinking. They're shuttering agencies, they're shutting people down, they're finding things like $2 million spent in Guatemala for sex changes, $3 million spent in Brazil for a girl-centric climate change, $4.8 million spent in Ukraine for social media influencers. While you're at it, we spent, not we, but the people who vote for this, I've voted against all of this, but the members of the Senate who voted for this spent several $100,000 sending designers in Ukraine to the fashion show in Paris. It goes on and on. Thousands of dollars for a trans opera in Colombia, more thousands of dollars for a trans comic book in Peru, hundreds of thousands of dollars spent studying rats to see if lonely rats use more cocaine than well-socialized rats. Guess what? Lonely rats love the cocaine. You spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of your money on this craziness. Why not take that crazy spending that Doge and Elon Musk are finding and move it over to securing the border? Instead, fiscal conservatives are faced with a bill they're putting forward to just simply increase the spending. I'm all for moving it around. I'm all for saving it from the craziness and pushing it over into something more valuable. There is a procedure for doing this. It's a special procedure, doesn't require any Democrat vote. It can happen through simple majority, and it has a fancy name. It's called rescission. So all the administration would have to do is bundle together several $100 billion of savings, which it appears they're finding, bundle it together in one bill, send it back to us, and by simple majority, without any help from the Democrats, Republicans can cut spending. Instead, things aren't what they appear to be. You see all this great work being done to cut spending, to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, and then you see the Senate acting. We're going to vote all night long to set up a bill to increase spending by $340 billion. There is a true philosophical debate within the Republican Party and really within both parties about what the biggest threats to our country are. Are the gravest threats to America from within or from without? I would argue that they're from within. I don't lay awake at night fearing foreign invasion, that invaders are coming to our shores any moment. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepared, that we shouldn't defend ourselves, but it does mean that we don't have to have unlimited spending on our military. Look, many of my family have served, soldiers have to be paid, and we should take care of them. But at the same time, we shouldn't be everywhere around the world all the time. We spent close to $300 billion in Ukraine. We got soldiers all over Africa. We got soldiers in Syria, We got soldiers everywhere. We don't need to be doing that. If you want to put our military money and spending in perspective, we spend more than the next 9 countries combined. It's not that we're spending too little, we're spending a lot. But if you decide that you want more money for the military, take it from the climate change, the girl-centric climate change in Brazil. Quit spending your money overseas. Over the years, we've given Egypt nearly $60 billion. Who runs Egypt? A general, where there are no elections, kind of like Ukraine, where there's a president, but he doesn't have to run for re-election because he's canceled the elections. Why in the world will we be giving money hand over fist to dictators and people who don't stand for election? In Egypt, we gave it to one family, the Mubarak family. When he was finally ousted from power, he had $20 billion on him. Well, it actually wasn't all on him. A lot of it was in Swiss banks and all over the place, but he was worth $20 billion. And that's nothing. Each of his kids were worth another $5 billion. So he basically was able to steal $30 billion of the $60 billion that American taxpayers sent to Egypt. That's foreign aid. That's a story of your foreign aid, is you've been being ripped off decade after decade. But while Elon Musk and Doge are doing their job, working overtime till late at night, finding us those savings from foreign aid, send them back. We spend $40 billion in foreign aid. You could send $30 billion back, and America would be safer and stronger, and you could put the $30 billion towards either to the military or to the border, your choice. There's money like that can be saved and moved around, but it's going to have to come back. Ultimately, all the talk of the savings is ephemeral. It isn't real until Congress has the courage to vote on it. It has to be certified by a vote. If Congress doesn't vote, it sort of wishes and washes around in the ether, and it may or may not wind up being savings. Ultimately, Congress is going to have to do their job. But what we're doing today, the vote on the budget is not doing our job. What we're doing today, which will be a Republican-led effort, minus me, will be an effort to tee up a bill to increase federal spending. I would say let's take the savings that we're finding, move that over to any accounts, do it through a vote of Congress, do it through a simple majority. It can actually be done even without the budgetary process. A rescission package can be sent back without even going through the whole budget problem. What we are faced with, though, is come the end of the year, we're halfway through the year, so we're voting on a budget today that is really somewhat of a fiction because the year's already half over. We know what's being spent. We know in the end, we're going to spend a little over $7 trillion this year. The problem is we're going to bring in about $5 trillion, and we're going to spend about $7 trillion. We're $2 trillion short. They're getting ready within weeks to add a couple $100 billion for California. Now look, it's appropriate to have sympathy for people in their plight, but it is not good for the country simply to borrow money to send it to anyone. We should be, if we're going to help people in need, we should be taking that money from the taxes that come in. We shouldn't be borrowing it from China and sending it to California. No matter how noble the purpose it is, we should be spending what comes in. We should not be borrowing a penny. But come the end of the year, we're going to be over $2 trillion in increased debt for 1 year. What's our total? Our total is going to be over 37, maybe 38 trillion by the end of the year. Interest? The largest item in our budget is now interest. About $1 trillion in interest every year. One estimate is over the next 10 years, it'll be like $14 trillion in interest. Now, interest doesn't buy anything. Interest isn't feeding anybody. Interest isn't putting out fires in California. Interest is simply wasted because of the profligate ways of both parties. People voted for a change. They said, we're going to get a change. They like what Donald Trump is doing. They like what Doge is doing. They like what Elon is doing. And yet here we are. The Republicans are acting like the Democrats. They're going to vote to increase spending by $342 billion.